The Last Excavation. She spent her life uncovering history. She never expected to uncover her own. History remembers bones. Love remembers everything. Chapter 1. The Weight of Paper. The call lasted 2 minutes and 43 seconds. It took 15 years to destroy Dr. Sloan Bennett's peace. For a long moment after the line went dead, she remained exactly where she was, the phone still resting against her ear as though her hand had forgotten how to move. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of her 20th floor office, Las Vegas shimmered beneath a relentless afternoon sun. Neon signs had yet to wake, but the city was already humming, impatiently counting the hours until darkness dressed it in spectacle. Inside the office, everything was still. Sloan slowly lowered the phone. She didn't place it on the desk. She laid it down. The same way she had once lowered the jawbone of a juvenile Allosaurus into a padded crate after 3 weeks of painstaking excavation. One careless movement could fracture something that had survived millions of years. Fragile things deserved respect. Today, that fragile thing was her composure. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. The silence that followed was unfamiliar. Her office was rarely quiet. There was always the muted tapping of keyboards beyond the frosted glass walls, the distant ring of telephones, someone laughing in reception, printers humming, footsteps crossing polished floors. No bones about it had grown from a one-woman consultancy operating from a rented trailer into one of the most respected paleontological research firms in the United States. Silence didn't belong here. Yet it settled around her like dust over an abandoned dig. The soft knock at her office door broke it. 3 measured taps. Professional. Respectful. Predictable. Sloan opened her eyes, but didn't immediately answer. Another knock. Dr. Bennett? She inhaled slowly, drawing cool air into lungs that refused to feel full. Come in. The door opened just enough for Emma Carlyle to step inside, balancing a silver tray with practiced ease. Emma had been Sloan's executive assistant for nearly 6 years, long enough to know the rhythm of her employer's days better than Sloan sometimes knew it herself. You're going to tell me you've forgotten lunch again. Emma smiled as she crossed the room. I'm going to tell you I had every intention of eating it. You've had every intention of eating yesterday's lunch too. Sloan almost smiled. Almost. Emma noticed. She always noticed. The tray settled gently onto the mahogany desk. Coffee. Black. Exactly 1 sugar. Chicken Caesar salad with the dressing on the side because Sloan hated soggy lettuce. A bottle of sparkling water. And an envelope. Emma slid it forward with 2 fingers. This was left at reception about 20 minutes ago. Sloan's gaze locked onto it. Everything else disappeared. The coffee might as well have evaporated. The salad became invisible. The office seemed to fold inward until only the envelope remained. Cream-colored. Hand-delivered. A dark green wax seal pressed into the flap. A single fossilized leaf. No, not fossilized. Stylized. But unmistakable. The room suddenly felt smaller. Emma frowned. Dr. Bennett? Sloan realized she'd stopped breathing. She forced air into her lungs. When was this delivered? The receptionist said a courier. Did he leave a name? Emma shook her head. No signature. He only said it had to reach you personally. Sloan continued staring. 10 years ago. She would have admired the craftsmanship. Someone had taken time making the seal. The leaf was beautifully detailed. Elegant. Now, it looked like a death sentence stamped in wax. Emma shifted her weight. You don't look well. I'm fine. It came too quickly. Too automatically. Emma didn't believe her. You've gone pale. It's been a long day. You've had longer. Silence stretched between them. Emma had learned years ago when to push and when not to. Today she chose one gentle step further. I can cancel the 2 o'clock. It's already canceled. The investors? I'll speak to them tomorrow. Emma nodded slowly. She had worked for enough powerful people to recognize when someone wanted privacy. But she had only worked for one who thanked the cleaners by name, remembered birthdays without reminders, and insisted interns call her Sloan instead of Dr. Bennett. That woman had disappeared in the space of looking at one envelope. "I'll leave you to your lunch." Sloan didn't answer. Emma paused at the door. "If you need anything." "I know." The door closed softly behind her. The latch clicked. Silence returned. This time, it wasn't empty. It watched. Sloan remained motionless. Her eyes never left the envelope. There were nearly 4,000 artifacts displayed throughout her office. Not because she believed in decorating with history. Because every piece reminded her why she had started. A trilobite embedded in shale from her first independent excavation. A polished ammonite gifted by a museum in London. A cast of a juvenile triceratops skull that children were encouraged to touch during educational tours. Behind her desk hung photographs instead of awards. Sloan standing knee-deep in sandstone, laughing beneath an oversized hat. Covered in red desert dust in Arizona. Holding a tiny fossil tooth between dirt-stained fingers with the kind of smile reserved for impossible discoveries. The awards occupied one wall. Almost as an afterthought. Pulitzers. Scientific excellence. Honorary doctorates. International lectures. Recognition. Success. Visitors always looked at the awards first. Sloan never did. Her eyes always drifted to the photographs. Because they reminded her that before she became Dr. Sloan Bennett, she had simply been Hopper. She was 7 the first time she dug up Mrs. Peterson's rose garden. Not intentionally. She'd found an unusual rock beside the pavement and became convinced it was hiding something underneath. 3 hours later, half the flower bed looked as though a family of determined badgers had declared war. Marcus Bennett stood at the edge of the crater, hands planted on his hips. "What exactly are you looking for, Hopper?" Without looking up, she answered. "History." Her father pinched the bridge of his nose. "I was hoping history lived somewhere else. I almost found a bone." "You found Mrs. Peterson's sprinkler system." "It was hiding." Before Marcus could answer, 2 identical teenage boys appeared behind him carrying supermarket bags. DeMarcus took one look at the garden. "I told you she'd do it." DeAndre laughed so hard he nearly dropped the bread. "Hopper." Sloan looked up proudly. "I think there's a fossil." DeMarcus walked into the hole, crouched beside her, and picked up the perfectly ordinary stone she'd been protecting. "Hopper." He turned it over dramatically. "This is concrete." She frowned. It could have been a dinosaur. It could have been the driveway. It looked prehistoric. DeAndre reached down, scooped his little sister effortlessly under one arm despite her loud protests, and carried her out of the hole. "Come on, Indiana Bones." I wasn't finished. Mrs. Peterson appeared on her porch. Marcus closed his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Margaret." The elderly woman looked at the crater. Then at Sloan dangling upside down over DeAndre's shoulder. "Finally," she sighed. "If she finds a Tyrannosaurus under my begonias, you'll let me keep it?" Sloan asked hopefully. Mrs. Peterson laughed first. Then Marcus. Then the twins. And eventually, even Sloan. That evening her mother had carefully washed the dirt from Sloan's tiny hands before placing an old fossil shell in them. "Do you know why people lose discoveries?" Sloan shook her head. "Because they rush." Her mother smiled. "History has waited millions of years." She gently closed Sloan's little fingers around the fossil. "It can wait another 5 minutes while you use a brush." Present day. Sloan looked down at her own hands. They were trembling. Not violently. Just enough. Enough that she tucked them beneath the edge of the desk, ashamed of them. She had spent a lifetime learning patience. Learning precision. Learning that pressure cracked fossils. That haste destroyed evidence. That the smallest fragment could rewrite history. Yet one envelope, one wax seal, had reduced her to someone she barely recognized. And she hadn't even touched it yet. Chapter 2. Not all fossils are buried. The envelope remained untouched for another 7 minutes. Sloane knew because the clock above the bookshelf continued its steady march forward, each tick becoming louder in the quiet of her office. 7 minutes. 7 minutes of staring at something that weighed less than an ounce. 7 minutes of convincing herself that if she didn't open it, whatever waited inside couldn't hurt her. It was irrational. She knew that. A lifetime spent studying evidence had taught her that fear and logic rarely shared the same room. The mind created monsters from shadows. The heart created disasters from possibilities. But Sloane Bennett had built her entire career on one principle. Things hidden beneath the surface always eventually revealed themselves. Fossils, bones, lost civilizations, secrets. Everything left a trace. Even when people believed they had buried something deep enough. She slowly stood. The movement felt strangely deliberate, almost ceremonial. The same way she approached an excavation site. No sudden movements. No assumptions. Observe first. Understand second. Act third. Her chair rolled quietly backward, the leather releasing a soft sigh as she stepped away from it. Outside her office, Las Vegas continued living. A city built on illusion. A place where people came to forget. Where fortunes disappeared overnight and strangers reinvented themselves beneath flashing lights. But Sloane had always been fascinated by what remained after the spectacle ended. The discarded playing cards. The abandoned buildings. The stories beneath the surface. Las Vegas was constantly changing. But beneath the concrete and neon, the desert remembered everything. She moved towards the window. 20 floors below, traffic crawled along the strip, tiny streams of color moving between towering hotels and casinos. The city looked beautiful from above. Almost peaceful. Sloane knew better. From a distance, everything looked less dangerous. That was true of deserts. That was true of history. That was true of people. She reached up and removed her glasses. The thin frames rested between her fingers. A nervous habit. Her father used to tease her about it. You know, Hopper, one day those glasses are going to fall apart because you keep taking them off every time you think. She would always argue. I don't take them off. You just did. I was cleaning them. You cleaned them yesterday. They needed it. Marcus Bennett would shake his head. Your mother and I created a genius who argues with eyewear. The memory almost made her smile. Almost. Today there was no room for nostalgia. Not yet. She placed her glasses back on her face and turned towards the desk. The envelope waited. Patiently. Almost confidently. She hated that. She hated that a piece of paper could make her feel like prey. Sloane Bennett had walked through unstable excavation sites. She had climbed cliffs where one wrong step meant falling hundreds of feet. She had stood in front of television cameras and defended controversial discoveries against experts twice her age. She had stared down museum directors who thought her young age meant she was inexperienced. Fear had never been the thing that stopped her. But this was different. Because she knew the person who sent it. Even if she didn't know their name, she knew what they had done. Her fingers reached for the envelope. Stopped. For one brief second, she considered calling her brothers first. DeAndre. DeMarcus. They would answer immediately. They always had. Since childhood, there had never been a moment when Sloane needed them and they weren't there. But that was exactly why she couldn't call. Not yet. If the contents were what she feared, she needed to know before she dragged them into it. She picked up the envelope. The paper was heavier than expected. Quality. Expensive. Intentional. Someone had not grabbed something from a desk drawer. Someone had prepared this. Her thumb brushed over the wax seal. The leaf. A small, delicate impression. A symbol of something that had been preserved. A thing that had died but refused to disappear. Her stomach tightened. Slowly, she reached for the silver letter opener lying beside her computer. It was an old gift from her mother. A joke, really. Letitia Bennett had given it to her when Sloane received her first major research grant. Every scientist needs a dramatic tool for opening important things. Sloane had laughed. Her mother had been right. She slid the blade beneath the envelope flap. The sound was almost painfully quiet. A small tear. A soft release. A doorway opening. The contents slipped free. One single sheet of paper. No letter. No explanation. No threat. Just a card. Sloane stared at it. Her heartbeat changed. She didn't understand why. Not immediately. The card was blank except for one sentence. 5 words. 5 words that reached through 10 years and pulled the past into the present. Her lips moved before sound came. Not all fossils are buried. The room stopped. Not quiet. Stopped. The air conditioning continued humming. The traffic below continued moving. Somewhere outside, someone laughed. But Sloane no longer heard any of it. Because she knew. She knew exactly what those words meant. Her hand loosened. The card slipped from her fingers. It landed on the marble floor. A soft whisper of paper against stone. And suddenly she wasn't 37 years old, standing in a glass office surrounded by success. She was 24 again. Standing beneath the unforgiving sun of the Mojave Desert. Holding a discovery that would change everything. 10 years earlier. The Mojave Desert did not welcome visitors. It tolerated them. The heat arrived before the landscape did. It pressed against the rental SUV before the tires had even left the paved road, wrapping around the vehicle like a living thing determined to remind everyone who belonged there. Sloane sat in the passenger seat, studying the map spread across her lap. Or rather, pretending to study it. Because the truth was, she had looked at the same coordinates nearly 50 times. A private tip. An unknown caller. A possible fossil site. A discovery that could change everything. At the time, no bones about it was barely more than an idea with a logo. A company built on Sloane's belief that science didn't belong only to universities and wealthy institutions. She wanted to bring discoveries back into the hands of people. She wanted history to belong to everyone. And she desperately needed this excavation to succeed. Her career depended on it. Her reputation depended on it. Her dream depended on it. Beside her, the driver wiped sweat from his forehead despite the air conditioning working overtime. I have to ask. Sloane looked up. What? Are you always this excited about dirt? She smiled. Not dirt. He raised an eyebrow. Sand? No. Rocks? No. He gestured towards the endless desert surrounding them. Then what exactly are we driving 3 hours into nowhere to find? Sloane looked out the window. At the landscape. At the millions of years of history beneath their feet. Evidence. The driver laughed. That might be the most scientist answer I've ever heard. She smiled. Good. Good. Means I'm doing my job. The team arrived just after midday. They were expecting fossils. They were expecting history. They were expecting the beginning of something extraordinary. They never expected to uncover a graveyard. The first thing Sloane noticed was the fabric. Not bone. Not rock. Fabric. A small piece of faded blue material caught between layers of earth. She froze. A fossil did not wear clothing. A fossil did not carry a backpack. A fossil did not belong to someone who had once laughed, cried, dreamed, and been loved. Her brush stopped moving. Sloane. Her assistant's voice was uncertain. She didn't answer. Slowly, carefully, she brushed away more dirt. The earth gave up another secret. Small bones. Too small. The excitement of discovery vanished. Replaced by something cold. Human remains. And suddenly the desert wasn't a place of ancient history. It was a place of stolen futures. Chapter 3. The Things We Protect. The desert had always spoken to Sloane. Most people saw emptiness when they looked across the endless stretches of sand and stone. They saw nothing. A place where nothing grew. Nothing survived. Nothing waited. Sloane knew better. The desert was an archive. Every layer of earth held a memory. Every fragment told a story. The trick was learning how to listen. But that afternoon, the Mojave was silent. Not peaceful. Silent. There was a difference. Sloane stood frozen beside the excavation site, her brush still held loosely between her fingers. The small piece of blue fabric remained partially exposed beneath the dirt. A lifetime of training told her exactly what she was looking at. A lifetime of being human told her she wished she was wrong. Sloane. This time her assistant, Caleb, sounded different. No curiosity. No excitement. Only uncertainty. She slowly lowered the brush. Nobody touches anything. The words came out quieter than she expected. The team looked up. For confused faces turned towards her. Moments earlier, they had been archaeologists and researchers chasing discovery. Now they were witnesses. Sloane. Caleb took a step closer. She lifted her hand. Stop. Something in her voice made everyone freeze. She looked around the excavation site. The equipment. The carefully placed tools. The exposed earth. The fragments of clothing. The small evidence of lives interrupted. This wasn't a discovery. It was a crime scene. And they had just walked into it. Pack everything away. Nobody moved. Sloane. Her voice sharpened. Now. That broke the spell. The team immediately moved. Tools were gathered. Cameras were placed carefully away. Samples were covered. No one asked questions. Because everyone who worked with Dr. Sloane Bennett knew one thing. She never panicked. Not when storms destroyed excavation sites. Not when investors threatened funding. Not when experts questioned her discoveries. If Sloane Bennett was afraid, then whatever stood in front of them was something worth fearing. She stepped away from the open ground. Only then did she allow herself to look around. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction. Beautiful. Ancient. Indifferent. Someone had brought these children here. Someone had buried them. Someone had believed the earth would keep their secrets. And maybe it would have. If Sloane Bennett had not answered a phone call, the notification appeared while she was trying to call the authorities. At first, she barely registered it. Her phone vibrated in her hand. A normal sound. A normal interruption. Then she saw the headline. And the world tilted. Graveyard of missing children discovered by private archaeology company. Her thumb stopped moving. She read it again. Then again. No. Impossible. They had been here less than an hour. The information was not public. The police had not arrived. The media could not possibly know. Unless. Her eyes moved slowly back towards the excavation site. Unless someone wanted them to know. The article loaded further. Questions raised about how company obtained location of suspected burial site. Her stomach dropped. No. No. The word escaped before she could stop it. Caleb turned. What? She didn't answer. She stared at the screen. The accusation was already forming. Already spreading. They wouldn't see what she saw. They wouldn't see the children. They wouldn't see the horror. They would see a company that somehow knew where bodies were buried. They would see profit. They would see fame. They would see motive. The phone slipped slightly in her hand. 10 years of building. 10 years of proving herself. 10 years of careful, ethical work. Gone. One headline could turn every discovery into suspicion. Every fossil into evidence. Every achievement into a question. How did no bones about it know? How did Sloane Bennett find them? Why there? Why those coordinates? Her fingers tightened around the phone. Because she knew the answer. She didn't know who. But someone had placed them there. Someone had chosen her. Sloane. She didn't hear Caleb approach. Sloane, are you okay? She looked at him. Really looked. At the concern on his face. At the fear beginning to form in the eyes of her team. And suddenly something became very clear. This wasn't about her reputation. Not first. Not anymore. There were children beneath that earth. Families who had waited years for answers. People who deserved the truth. But she couldn't help them if she lost control of the situation. She forced herself to breathe. Then she dialed the only number she trusted. The call connected before the first ring finished. Sloane. Her brother's voice. Immediate. Familiar. Safe. For 1 second, she was not Dr. Sloane Bennett. She was 8 years old, sitting in a tree after falling out and refusing to cry because her brothers were watching. She was 12, furious because DeAndre and DeMarcus scared away a boy who had made fun of her. She was 16, leaving for university while both brothers pretended they weren't devastated. She was their little sister, and she hated that she needed them. Donnie. One word. One breath. And DeAndre knew. His entire tone changed. What happened? Sloane closed her eyes. I didn't know. Silence. Not confusion. Understanding. Damn it, Sloane. The anger wasn't directed at her. It was fear wearing a different mask. I didn't know, she repeated. Her voice broke. I swear I didn't know. DeAndre exhaled. And suddenly the older brother appeared beneath the detective. Listen to me. She straightened. Do not touch anything else. I'm not. Do not let anyone touch anything else. Donnie. No. His voice softened. Sloane. Listen. She did. Because she always had. Where are you? She gave him the coordinates. A pause. Then she heard movement. DeMarcus is already getting the car. Her eyes closed. Of course he was. They had always moved as a unit. 3 children. 3 paths. 1 family. We're coming. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they broke something inside. Because the moment she heard them, she finally allowed herself to admit how scared she was. Donnie. I'm here. What if? She couldn't finish. What if her career was destroyed? What if people thought she was involved? What if the truth never came out? What if the person who buried these children was still watching? DeAndre's voice lowered. Little bug. The nickname hit her harder than she expected. A tiny piece of childhood reaching across 10 years of fear. You did nothing wrong. A tear slipped down her cheek. I didn't know. I know. I swear. I know. And for the first time since discovering the graves, Sloane let herself cry. The sound of the SUV arrived before the vehicle appeared. Dust rose behind it like a storm chasing across the desert. Sloane stood waiting. Watching. The door opened before the engine fully stopped. DeMarcus was out first. Always. Always the first. He crossed the distance between them in seconds. And then Dr. Sloane Bennett disappeared. The scientist. The award winner. The woman who stood in front of cameras and defended discoveries. Gone. She was just his little sister. He pulled her into his arms. And she broke. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just completely. The kind of breaking that happens when someone has been holding themselves together for too long. There she is. His voice was quiet. The same voice from years ago. The same voice that told a scared little girl hiding after a nightmare that monsters didn't exist. The world didn't end. She cried harder. Dem. I'm here. His hand moved over her hair. You called us. The words were simple, but they carried something deeper. Because that was the thing about family. Sometimes love wasn't grand speeches. Sometimes it was a person driving across a desert because your voice sounded wrong. Chapter 4. The Woman Who Returned. The evening noise from the Las Vegas Strip had always been something Sloane Bennett could ignore. Normally, the city was built to demand attention. It screamed in color and sound. Music poured from open doors, crowds moved like rivers beneath neon signs, and somewhere below her office, someone was probably celebrating a win they would lose before sunrise. Las Vegas never slept. Neither did ambition. But tonight, the city sounded different. The laughter below felt distant. The traffic sounded like thunder. The bright lights reflecting against the glass walls of her office felt less like a view and more like a reminder. Everything was visible. Everything could be exposed. Sloane Bennett sat behind her mahogany desk, staring at the leaf-shaped symbol lying beside the envelope. She had spent 10 years trying to forget that image. Not because she didn't remember, because she remembered too well. The Mojave Desert. The children. The bodies hidden beneath the earth. The investigation. The questions. The fear that her entire career would collapse before it had even begun. Back then, no bones about it had been nothing more than a dream held together by determination, borrowed equipment, and a woman who refused to believe she didn't belong. She had been 27 years old. Young enough to still doubt herself. Old enough to understand exactly what she could lose. Her brothers had saved her. Not by changing what happened. They could not undo the discovery. They could not erase the graves. They could not find the person responsible. But they had protected her from becoming another victim of the story. DeAndre and DeMarcus had taken responsibility for the investigation. They had stood in front of the cameras. They had told the media that Sloane had acted correctly when she received the anonymous information and had immediately reported the location to law enforcement. They had redirected suspicion. They had protected no bones about it. They had protected their sister. The world saw responsible police work. It did not see a young paleontologist who had unknowingly been used by a serial killer. But there was one thing nobody knew. The person who sent Sloane the coordinates 10 years ago was the same person who buried those children. The architect of the nightmare. The person who had watched from the shadows while Sloane uncovered their secrets. And now, that person had returned. Sloane closed her eyes. She exhaled slowly. A breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Fuck. The word left her lips quietly. Not with anger. Not with panic. With exhaustion. It disappeared into the silence of the office. For a moment, she was no longer Dr. Sloane Bennett. Nobel Prize winner. Professor. Internationally respected paleontologist. She was a little girl sitting in the dirt while classmates laughed at her for digging through sand and chasing things nobody else could see. She was the child who believed every buried thing had a story. She was the woman who had spent her entire life uncovering the past. And now the past was uncovering her. Her eyes opened. The leaf remained where it had fallen from the envelope. The signature. The same symbol left behind at every crime scene connected to the Mojave killer. 10 years of silence. 10 years without answers. 10 years where the world believed the monster had disappeared. But monsters did not disappear. They waited. Her fingers moved towards her phone. The familiar number was saved. A number she had known for half her life. DeAndre. Her thumb hovered above the call button. She needed to hear his voice. Needed the grounding presence of someone who remembered her before the awards, before the company, before the world knew her name. Before she could press the button. The office door opened. Sloane moved instantly. Her chair scraped backwards. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. Nobody was supposed to be in the building. The security team had confirmed the floor was empty. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The woman standing in the doorway did not look like someone who had broken into a building. She looked like someone who had been invited. Immaculately dressed. Controlled. Confident. Like a storm that had learned how to wear human skin. Sloane held her phone tightly. Who? Her voice caught. She forced herself to continue. Who are you? The woman closed the door behind her. The soft click echoed through the office. Then she took 2 slow steps forward. Her heels struck the marble floor. Measured. Unhurried. Certain. Put the phone down, Dr. Bennett. The command was not loud. It did not need to be. Something about the woman's voice reached beneath Sloane's fear and touched something older. Familiar. Sloane looked down at her phone. DeAndre's name still glowed on the screen. A lifeline. A reminder. Slowly, she lowered it. The stranger walked further into the room. She did not glance at the expensive artwork. She did not admire the fossils displayed around the office. She looked at Sloane. Only Sloane. Then she sat in the visitor chair, crossed her long legs, and pointed calmly towards the chair behind the desk. Please, Dr. Bennett. Sit. Sloane hated that her body obeyed before her mind decided. Her legs carried her back to her chair. She never looked away from the woman. Not once. Who are you? The question came out stronger this time. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. The stranger studied her. Her fingers came together, forming a perfect triangle. A habit. A calculated movement. Like she was analyzing a problem, not meeting a person. The silence stretched. Uncomfortable. Intentional. Then the woman leaned forward slightly. I believe you, and I share a very interesting past, Dr. Sloane Bennett. Sloane's eyes narrowed. I asked who you are. The woman did not answer immediately. Sloane picked up her phone again. My brothers are law enforcement. Her voice steadied. They will be here in 10 minutes. A small flicker of amusement crossed the woman's face. Will they? The question unsettled her more than it should have. Sloane ignored it. Who are you, and how did you get past my security? The woman looked down and brushed an invisible piece of lint from the armrest. Then she looked back at Sloane. Her voice lowered. I am the only person standing between you and that leaf, Hopper. The world stopped. Not the way it had when she saw the card. Not with fear. With memory. The nickname hit her like a physical blow. Her breath caught. Her hand moved to her mouth before she could stop it. Only one other person called her that. Only one other person had ever known why. The woman watched the recognition happen. Sloane. The name was softer now. Almost affectionate. Sloane stared. No. It couldn't be. Victoria. A small smile appeared. Not victorious. Not cruel. Almost sad. Hi, Hopper. 20 years disappeared in a single heartbeat. Victoria Volkov. The Russian exchange student who had arrived in Sloane's high school and somehow became the only person who saw her exactly as she was. Not the strange girl who preferred fossils to parties. Not the quiet student who carried books everywhere. Not the girl who was always covered in dirt because she was searching for something beneath the surface. Just Sloane. They had been inseparable for 1 year. Until Victoria's family suddenly left. A threat. A rushed departure. No goodbye that made sense. No explanation. No way to find her. One day she was there. The next day she was gone. And Sloane had carried the loss quietly for 20 years. Because some people leave footprints in your life that never disappear. How? Her voice failed. She tried again. How are you here? Victoria leaned back. Seems the great Sloane Bennett has lost her ability to speak. The sarcasm was familiar. The teasing. The same sharp edge she remembered. A laugh escaped Sloane. Broken. Disbelieving. More like a strangled breath than amusement. And for the first time since the envelope arrived, she felt something other than fear. She felt the impossible. The past had not only returned. It had a face. And it was sitting across from her. Chapter 5. Ghosts have names. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. The silence between them was not empty. It was crowded. 20 years of questions stood between them. 20 years of memories. 20 years of wondering. Sloane remained seated behind her desk, staring at the woman in front of her. Victoria Volkov. The name belonged to another lifetime. A lifetime before degrees and lectures. Before museums fought for her discoveries. Before the world knew Dr. Sloane Bennett. Before she learned that success came with its own kind of loneliness. You are alive. The words left Sloane before she could stop them. Victoria's expression shifted slightly. Not hurt. Not offended. Just something unreadable. That is usually how people return. Sloane almost smiled. Almost. Because there it was. That sharp humor. That dry little edge. The same one that had made 17-year-old Sloane laugh when she thought nobody could ever understand her. You always did have a talent for making impossible things sound ordinary. Victoria looked around the office. Her eyes moved over the awards, the photographs, the fossils displayed behind glass, the evidence of a life built from determination. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "You really did it." Sloane frowned. "What?" Victoria looked back at her. "Everything." The word carried more weight than Sloane expected. "You became exactly who you said you would become." For a moment, Sloane saw the girl she remembered. The teenager who sat beside her under the old oak tree behind the school. The girl who listened while Sloane explained fossil formations with the excitement of someone discovering treasure. The girl who never laughed when Sloane spoke about ancient worlds. Everyone else had thought she was strange. Victoria thought she was fascinating. "You followed my career?" The question came out before Sloane could stop it. A flicker crossed Victoria's face. Something close to sadness. "Of course I did." Sloane's chest tightened. "Then why?" The question hung there. "Why did you leave? Why did you disappear? Why did you never call? Why did you let me believe I meant nothing?" Victoria looked away. And that small movement told Sloane more than words could. The scientist in her noticed. The friend in her felt it. There was pain there. Real pain. "I had no choice." Sloane's jaw tightened. Everyone says that when they make choices they don't want to explain. A small smile touched Victoria's lips. "There she is." "What?" "The Sloane Bennett I remember." The comment should have warmed her. Instead, it unsettled her. Because Sloane suddenly remembered something else. The phone call. The distorted voice. The warning. The choice of words. The tone. She looked at Victoria. Really looked. The way she held herself. The calm confidence. The slight lowering of her voice when she wanted to make a point. A cold feeling moved through Sloane. The voices were different. But the rhythm. The rhythm was dangerously familiar. "Who called me?" The question changed the atmosphere instantly. Victoria did not move. But Sloane noticed. A fraction of hesitation. A pause. A tiny crack. "Called you." Sloane leaned back. "There is no point pretending you don't know what I mean." Victoria remained silent. Sloane continued. "Someone called me before you arrived." She watched her carefully. "They knew about the leaf." "Nothing." "They knew about the Mojave." "Still nothing." "They told me someone had been waiting 10 years for me to remember." Victoria's eyes changed. Only slightly. But Sloane saw it. Because Sloane had spent her entire life studying what was hidden. She studied bones. She studied history. She studied the tiny fragments people left behind. And Victoria Volkov had just left one. "You know something." It was not a question. Victoria looked down at her hands. "I know more than I wanted to." Sloane felt her stomach tighten. "Are you the one who called?" The silence that followed was answer enough. But then Victoria looked up. "No." The response came too quickly. Too firmly. Sloane believed her. And that frightened her more. Because if Victoria was telling the truth, then someone else was moving pieces around the board. "Then you know who did?" Victoria looked towards the window. The Las Vegas lights reflected against the glass. Beautiful. Artificial. A city hiding thousands of secrets. "I know who has been looking for you." Sloane's fingers tightened. "Who?" Victoria looked back at her. "The same people who forced me to leave." The room became colder. Not physically. Something else. Memory. 20 years ago? Victoria nodded. Sloane stared. "What happened?" For the first time since she entered the room, Victoria looked uncertain. Not afraid. Not exactly. But cautious. Like she was standing near the edge of something dangerous. "My family was not what you thought it was." Sloane waited. "My father was involved in things I did not understand when I was younger." The words were carefully chosen. Too carefully. "And when people wanted something from him, they used me." Sloane's expression softened despite herself. "Victoria." "I was 17, Sloane." The vulnerability in her voice stopped her. I was a child who thought leaving meant losing everything. Her eyes met Sloane's. But staying meant someone else losing everything. Sloane felt the ache of that. Because she remembered. She remembered the sudden move. The rushed goodbye. The rumors. The unanswered messages. She remembered feeling abandoned. And now she wondered how much of that pain had been carried by Victoria too. Why didn't you tell me? Victoria smiled sadly. Because you would have tried to help. Sloane opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because she would have. Of course she would have. That was who she was. Even as a teenager. Even before she became the woman sitting behind this desk. Victoria leaned back. And I couldn't let you become part of it. A silence settled. Then Sloane asked the question that had been sitting beneath every other question. Why now? Victoria looked at the leaf symbol on the desk. Her expression changed. The warmth disappeared. The past disappeared. What remained was someone who understood danger. Because whoever sent that wants you to know they are still watching. Sloane's heart tightened. And you? Victoria looked at her. Why are you here? For the first time, Victoria hesitated. Then she answered. Because 20 years ago I lost my best friend. Her voice softened. And I refuse to lose her again. The words should have comforted Sloane. Instead, they terrified her. Because the woman sitting in front of her was both familiar and impossible. A person from her happiest memories. A person connected to the darkest secret of her life. And somewhere between those two truths was the answer she needed. Sloane looked at the woman who had returned from the past. Tell me everything. Victoria held her gaze. Then slowly shook her head. Not tonight. Sloane frowned. Why? Because if I tell you everything. Victoria stood. You will never be able to look at the people around you the same way again. And with that, she walked towards the door. Leaving Sloane with the one thing she hated most. A question. Chapter 6. The Woman Behind the Rumors. Sloane Bennett had spent most of her adult life searching for things people thought were lost. Ancient civilizations. Forgotten species. Fragments of history buried beneath layers of earth. She had built a career from uncovering what others had failed to see. Which was why it bothered her more than anything else that for 20 years, Victoria Volkov had been a mystery she could never solve. After Victoria disappeared, Sloane searched. At first, it was simple. A teenager trying to find her best friend. She contacted old classmates. She searched university records. She looked for family information. She waited for some sign that Victoria was somewhere in the world, living a normal life. Nothing. It was as if Victoria Volkov had stepped out of existence. And that had always bothered Sloane. People left. People moved. People changed. But people did not vanish. Not completely. Unless they wanted to. Or unless someone made sure they did. Sloane sat alone in her office long after Victoria left. The city outside continued its endless performance. Lights. Noise. Movement. Life. She ignored all of it. Her laptop screen illuminated the darkness around her. The search bar remained empty. For a moment, she hesitated. Not because she didn't know what she wanted to search. Because she already knew. Victoria Volkov. Her fingers moved. The results appeared. And, just like 20 years ago, almost nothing. Sloane frowned. That was impossible. The woman who had just sat across from her was not someone who left no trace. Everything left evidence. That was the first lesson every researcher learned. A footprint. A document. A photograph. A record. Something. She clicked through the results. A few old mentions. Mostly speculation. A name appearing in places where names were carefully chosen. A photograph from an international charity event. A mention in an article about private security consultants. A rumor involving a wealthy Russian family. Nothing confirmed. Nothing solid. Nothing she could use. Sloane leaned back. Who are you? The question sounded strange spoken aloud. Because 20 years ago, She knew exactly who Victoria was. Her best friend. The girl who sat beside her during lunch because nobody else understood why she preferred reading about fossils instead of gossip. The girl who called her Hopper because she spent half her childhood digging holes like a determined little rabbit searching for buried treasure. But the woman who walked into her office tonight? That woman carried secrets. Her phone vibrated. Sloane looked down. A message from DeAndre. You alive? Despite everything, a smile touched her lips. She typed back. Unfortunately for you, yes. The response came immediately. Good. DeMarcus owes me $20. Sloane shook her head. Even now, even with a killer possibly resurfacing, even with her entire career threatened, her brothers could still make her smile. Why does Dem owe you money? 3 dots appeared. He said you would refuse to admit you were scared. Sloane stared at the message, then typed. Tell him he's right. The reply took longer this time. That is not the same as saying you aren't. She looked at the words. Because that was the difference. 10 years ago, fear had frozen her. Today, fear was simply information. A warning system. A piece of evidence. She was not the young woman standing in the desert anymore. She had spent 10 years building herself into someone who could face storms. Even if the storm had her name. The next morning, Sloane arrived at no bones about it before anyone else. Routine had always helped her think. Coffee. Silence. A walk through the research rooms. A reminder of everything she had built. She stopped in front of the display containing some of her earliest discoveries. Each fossil had a story. Each fragment had survived millions of years. Time did not destroy everything. Sometimes it preserved things until someone was ready to uncover them. She wondered if people worked the same way. If secrets waited. If memories waited. If monsters waited. Still talking to bones? The voice behind her stopped her. Sloane turned. Victoria stood near the entrance. No security alert. No warning. No explanation. Just there. Again. Sloane did not jump this time. She simply watched her. That earned the smallest smile from Victoria. Good. Sloane folded her arms. Good. You are adapting. I am assessing. Of course you are. Victoria walked further inside. Her eyes moved around the building. Not with curiosity. With recognition. Almost like she was seeing the life Sloane built from the outside. You searched for me. It wasn't a question. Sloane didn't deny it. Yes. Why? Sloane looked at her. Because you disappeared. Victoria nodded slowly. I know. No. Sloane's voice sharpened. You don't. The woman looked at her. I spent years thinking something happened to you. A flicker of emotion crossed Victoria's face. I know. I looked everywhere. I know. Do you know what it feels like to wonder if someone you cared for is dead? The words landed harder than Sloane intended. Silence followed. For the first time, Victoria looked away. I wasn't allowed to come back. Sloane studied her. Allowed. A pause. Then Victoria corrected herself. I couldn't. That was not the same answer. And Sloane noticed. Who stopped you? Victoria did not answer. Which was an answer. You know about the killer. Victoria's eyes lifted. Yes. The honesty surprised Sloane. No denial? No point. Sloane walked towards her desk. The person who sent me that leaf was connected to the Mojave. Yes. The same person who called me? No. Again, too quick. Sloane stopped. You are very certain. Because I know. And how do you know? Victoria remained silent. There it was. The wall. The one Sloane remembered from 20 years ago. Victoria had always been honest. But never careless. What happened to you? The question changed everything. Victoria's expression softened. I became someone who could survive. Sloane looked at her. That sounds lonely. A small smile. It was. The answer was quieter than expected. Then Victoria looked at the leaf symbol displayed on the evidence photograph. The person who created that symbol is older now. Sloane's expression changed. You know who it is? No. A pause. But I know enough. Enough for what? Victoria looked directly at her. Enough to know the person who started this may not be the person continuing it. The words settled heavily. Sloane understood immediately. A legacy. A successor. Someone carrying the same obsession. Family? Victoria did not answer. She didn't need to. Sloane felt the pieces shifting. The original killer had spent years hiding. But people did not live forever. And monsters rarely died quietly. Sometimes they passed their darkness on. That evening, Sloane stood alone in her office again. The city lights reflected against the windows. The same place where the nightmare had begun. But she was not the same woman. She picked up the evidence photograph. The leaf. The symbol. The signature. A decade ago, it had represented fear. Now it represented a question. And Sloane Bennett had built her entire life answering questions. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She looked at it. Once, she would have frozen. Now she simply answered. Hello. Silence. Then the distorted voice. Did she tell you? Sloane's eyes narrowed. The voice continued. Did Victoria tell you what she became? The call ended. Sloane stared at the phone. Then slowly looked towards the empty doorway. For the first time since Victoria returned, Sloane wondered if the most dangerous thing in the room had never been the killer. Maybe it was the person who had spent 20 years learning how to survive him. Chapter 7. The Woman Who Leaves No Footprints. Sloane Bennett had always trusted evidence. Evidence did not lie. It did not manipulate. It did not disappear for 20 years and walk back into your life carrying secrets. People did all those things. Which was why Victoria Volkov bothered her. Not because she did not believe her. That was the problem. Sloane believed her. And somehow, that was worse. Because every instinct she had developed as a scientist told her that Victoria was hiding something. Not because she was guilty. Because she was protecting something. The question was what? And from whom? The sun had barely risen when Sloane entered her office. She had slept for less than 3 hours. Not because she was afraid. Fear was easy. Fear had a name. Fear had a shape. This was different. This was curiosity mixed with suspicion. A dangerous combination for a woman who had built an entire career digging up things people preferred to leave buried. She placed 3 cups of coffee on her desk. 1 for herself. 2, because she knew her brothers. They would arrive before she finished the first. She was right. The office door opened 20 minutes later. DeAndre walked in first. DeMarcus followed behind him carrying a bag of breakfast. Sloane looked at the food. Then at him. You brought breakfast? DeMarcus shrugged. You were going to forget to eat. I was not. Both brothers looked at her. Sloane sighed. Fine. I was probably going to forget. Exactly. DeAndre placed a file on her desk. Now tell us what happened. Sloane looked at the file. Then at him. You already investigated? We know you. DeMarcus sat down. When you say you are fine, it usually means you have already created a 6-step plan, researched everyone involved, and forgotten that normal people sleep. Sloane frowned. I sleep. 3 hours does not count. I was thinking. That is worse. Despite everything, she smiled. A small one. The kind she only allowed herself around them. Then the smile disappeared. Her name is Victoria Volkov. Both brothers became still. Not dramatically. Not obviously. But Sloane noticed. Because she had spent her life noticing small things. You know her, Sloane said. DeAndre exchanged a glance with DeMarcus. Yeah, DeMarcus said. We know her. DeAndre leaned back in his chair. Not well, but yes. Sloane blinked. You do. Of course we do, DeMarcus said. She was around that year. DeAndre nodded once. You brought her home a few times. And you talked about her for months after she left. Sloane stared at them. I did not talk about her for months. Both brothers gave her the same look. The one that said they were not going to let her lie to herself. Sloane exhaled through her nose. Fine. Maybe I mentioned her. Frequently, DeAndre said. Very frequently, DeMarcus added. Sloane rubbed a hand over her face. That is not the point. It usually is, DeMarcus muttered. DeAndre opened the file. The point is that her name has come up before. Sloane straightened. Where? DeAndre opened the file. Private security reports. International consulting. Some intelligence-related rumors. Rumors. Nothing official. Sloane stared. That's impossible. DeMarcus nodded. That was our conclusion. DeAndre turned the file around. There are photographs. Articles. Mentions. Sloane scanned the pages. And every time someone tries to investigate further, they find nothing. Sloane looked up. Nothing. Nothing. A cold feeling moved through her. Not fear. Recognition. She knew this pattern. A fossil did not disappear. It was covered. Hidden. Preserved until someone found the right layer. People worked the same way. Someone had buried Victoria's history. The question was why. Later that afternoon, Sloane sat alone in the archive room. The room had always been her favorite place. No noise. No expectations. Just history waiting patiently. She had requested access to old school records. Not because she expected to find anything. Because she needed to understand. Victoria had not just disappeared. She had been removed. There was a difference. Sloane pulled up old photographs. There they were. Two teenagers. One smiling awkwardly. The other looking like she already knew the world was more dangerous than it appeared. Sloane traced the edge of the photograph. She remembered that girl. The one who sat beside her during lunch when everyone else thought Sloane was strange. The one who listened to her explain fossils. The one who called her Hopper because her brothers did. You really loved me, didn't you? The words escaped before she realized she had spoken them. Not romantic. Not yet. Not then. But something deeper. Something that 17-year-old Sloane had not understood. Something Victoria had been too afraid to name. Across the city, Victoria Volkov stood in a room where nobody knew the 17-year-old. Nobody teased her. Nobody saw the girl she used to be. The room was quiet. Professional. Cold. A man standing across from her handed her a folder. She knows. Victoria did not look up. I expected that. She is investigating. A small smile touched her lips. Of course she is. The man hesitated. After 20 years, you still know her. Victoria closed the folder. Better than anyone. The statement was not arrogant. It was simply true. The world knew Dr. Sloane Bennett. The woman who won awards. The woman who uncovered history. The woman who stood in front of cameras and defended her discoveries. But Victoria knew Hopper. The girl who cried when she accidentally stepped on a beetle because she thought she had hurt it. The girl who spent hours digging holes because she believed the earth was telling stories. The girl who never once looked at Victoria like she was something broken. The only person who made her feel like she was allowed to exist. She is in danger. The words pulled Victoria back. Her expression changed. She has always been in danger. Then why wait? That question remained between them. Why wait 20 years? Why allow the person she loved most to build a life without her? Victoria looked down. Because the truth was simple. She had not been strong enough. Not then. She was 17. Scared. Powerless. Her family had taught her one lesson above all others. Weakness was something people used against you. So she left. She survived. She learned. She became someone people feared. Someone dangerous enough that when she finally returned, nobody would be able to touch Sloane. I needed to become someone who could protect her. The man watched her carefully. You built an empire for one person? Victoria looked towards the window. No. A pause. I built myself. Her voice softened. And when I was finally strong enough, I came back. That evening, Sloane found something. It was not in the records. Not in the databases. Not in any official file. It was hidden in an old photograph. A photograph from 20 years ago. A school event. A group of students. Sloane and Victoria standing together. But behind them, a man. Older. Watching. Sloane enlarged the image. Her breath caught. She knew that face. Not because she had met him. Because she had seen him before. On a news report. A decade ago. Connected to the Mojave investigation. Not as the killer. As someone who had been interviewed. Someone who had claimed to have no connection to the victims. Someone who disappeared from public attention shortly afterwards. Sloane stared at the photograph. The past had just shifted. Not broken. Shifted. Like Earth before an excavation. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Again. This time, she answered immediately. Hello. Silence. Then the voice. You should have left the past buried. Sloane looked at the photograph. At Victoria. At the stranger in the background. Who are you? A quiet laugh. You really are your father's daughter. The call ended. Sloane stared at the phone. Then at the photograph. Because now she understood something. The woman who left no footprints had not disappeared. She had been running. And someone had been chasing her the entire time. Chapter 8. The Price of Protection. Sloane Bennett had spent her entire career understanding that every discovery came with consequences. People liked the romance of archaeology. The idea of uncovering forgotten worlds. Finding treasures lost to time. Holding pieces of history in your hands. They rarely spoke about what happened afterwards. The questions. The ownership. The people who wanted what you found. The people who wanted you silent. Every discovery had a price. She just never expected the most dangerous discovery of her life would be finding Victoria Volkov again. Victoria arrived without warning. Again. Sloane was beginning to suspect that warning was not something Victoria believed in. She stood near the window when the woman entered her office. No surprise this time. No fear. Just observation. You have a habit of appearing where you shouldn't be. Victoria closed the door behind her. You have a habit of putting yourself where you shouldn't be. Sloane raised an eyebrow. Still sarcastic. Still stubborn. A pause. Then, quietly. Still Hopper. The nickname landed differently now. Not like a memory. Like a wound. Sloane looked away. Don't. Victoria's expression softened. Don't what? Act like nothing happened. The words were sharper than she intended. But she did not take them back. For 20 years, she had carried the unanswered questions. She deserved answers. You disappeared. I know. You left. I know. You never called. Victoria looked down. I know. Sloane laughed once. There was no humor in it. You keep saying that. Because I do know. Then explain it. Silence. The silence of someone deciding how much truth another person could survive. Sloane noticed. Because she always noticed. You have been protecting me. Victoria looked up. Yes. The honesty surprised her. No denial? No. Why? Victoria walked closer. Because someone had to. Sloane's jaw tightened. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters. No. Sloane stood. The woman who had once been a frightened 27-year-old in the desert was gone. This was Dr. Sloane Bennett. The woman who had stood in front of governments and universities defending her work. The woman who had survived. That is the answer you give yourself. Victoria went still. Sloane continued. You decided I needed saving. A flicker. There. A reaction. You decided what was best for me. Victoria's voice lowered. Because I knew what would happen if I didn't. And you never thought I deserved the choice? The question hit harder than Sloane expected. Because Victoria looked hurt. Actually hurt. For a moment, the dangerous woman disappeared. And Sloane saw the girl again. The girl who left because she was scared. I spent 20 years making sure nobody could hurt you. Sloane's expression softened, then hardened again. That doesn't mean you get to decide what I can handle. Victoria looked at the photograph on the desk. The one Sloane had found. The man standing behind them. You know who he is. It was not a question. Victoria nodded. Yes. Sloane felt the answer before she heard it. Who? Someone connected to my family. The room became quiet. Your family? Victoria looked away. My father made enemies. And some enemies do not disappear when people die. Sloane studied her. Is that why you left? A pause. Partly. What was the other reason? Victoria looked at her. And for one moment, Sloane saw something vulnerable. I loved you. The words were quiet. Not dramatic. Not planned. Just truth. Sloane stopped breathing. Victoria continued. Even before I understood what it meant. The room felt smaller. You were the first person who made me feel like I was not something to be ashamed of. Sloane's heart tightened. Because she remembered. The way Victoria looked at her. The way she always stayed close. The way their friendship had felt different. Deeper. Something neither of them had known how to name. I couldn't let my world destroy yours. Sloane whispered. So, you disappeared. Yes. And became someone else. Victoria smiled sadly. Yes. Who are you now? The question was simple. The answer was not. Victoria looked towards the city. I became someone people listened to. That is not what I asked. I know. Sloane waited. Eventually, Victoria turned back. I became someone dangerous. The honesty unsettled her. Why? Because dangerous people do not get used. Sloane studied her. And do dangerous people protect innocent people? Victoria did not answer immediately. That hesitation stayed with Sloane. That night, Victoria received a message. One sentence. Nothing else. You should have left her buried. Her expression changed. The person watching knew. Not just about Sloane. About her. She deleted the message. Immediately. But not before memorizing it. Old habits. Survival habits. The following morning, Sloane arrived at her office and found a package waiting. No sender. No return address. Her security team had no record of delivery. Inside was a photograph. Her. Walking into the museum 3 days earlier. Taken from a distance. On the back was handwritten text. Everyone has someone protecting them. Sloane stared at the words. Her phone rang. Victoria. She answered immediately. What happened? Silence. Then Victoria's voice. Do not leave your office. Sloane frowned. Why? A pause. And for the first time since Victoria returned, Sloane heard fear. Real fear. Because they know about you. The line went silent. Sloane looked at the photograph. Then towards the window. The city stretched below her. Millions of people. Millions of stories. And somewhere among them, someone was watching. Chapter 9. The Things We Do for Love. Sloane Bennett had spent her life learning one important lesson. Everything had a foundation. A discovery. A theory. A truth buried beneath the surface. If something did not make sense, you kept digging until you found the answer. That was how science worked. That was how history worked. That was how Sloane worked. Which was why Victoria terrified her. Not because she was dangerous. Because she made sense. Every piece of her. Every decision. Every sacrifice. Every secret. They all connected. And that was the problem. Sloane understood her. Understanding someone was sometimes more frightening than fearing them. The security footage played silently on Sloane's computer screen. A man entering the museum. A man who should not have been there. The timestamp showed 2:13. The security system showed nothing. No alarm. No forced entry. No record of access. Yet there he was. Walking through the building like he belonged. Sloane paused the footage. How? The question was directed at the empty room. But she already knew the answer. Someone had helped him. Or someone had made sure the system did not see him. Her phone vibrated. Victoria. Again. Sloane stared at the name. Then answered. You knew. Silence. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence. That was all the confirmation she needed. You knew someone was going to be there. Victoria's voice was calm. I suspected. No. Sloane stood. Do not do that. Do what? Choose softer words to make something sound less serious. A pause. Then. Yes. Sloane closed her eyes. The honesty should have comforted her. It didn't. How long? Since yesterday. You knew yesterday? Yes. And you didn't tell me? I was handling it. The words hung there. Sloane felt something shift. Not fear. Anger. Handling it. Victoria was quiet. Sloane. No. Her voice sharpened. You don't get to decide that. I was trying to keep you safe. And I was trying to live my life. The silence that followed hurt both of them. When Victoria arrived 30 minutes later, Sloane was waiting. Not scared. Not helpless. Waiting. That seemed to surprise her. You are angry. Very observant. A small smile appeared. Still sarcastic. Still avoiding questions. The smile disappeared. Good. Sloane needed her to understand. I need you to listen carefully. Victoria nodded. I appreciate what you did. The words softened slightly. I do. Victoria looked relieved for half a second. Then Sloane continued. But appreciation is not permission. That landed. Victoria looked away. You saved me 20 years ago. Yes. You protected me. Yes. But you don't own me. The words were quiet. They were also absolute. For the first time, Victoria looked wounded. Not angry. Not offended. Wounded. Because somewhere along the way, Victoria had convinced herself that protecting Sloane was the same as loving her. And Sloane was forcing her to see the difference. Show me. Victoria looked at her. What? The world you built. Sloane folded her arms. You keep telling me you became dangerous. A pause. Show me what that means. Victoria studied her. You don't want to know. That is not your decision. A familiar expression crossed Victoria's face. The smallest hint of amusement. There she is. Don't. Hopper. Don't use that when you are trying to win an argument. Why? Because it works. For a moment, the tension broke. Only for a moment. Then Victoria reached into her coat and placed a folder on the desk. Sloane opened it. Inside were photographs. Names. Reports. Connections. People. A network. Not a criminal organization. Something more complicated. Information. Influence. Access. People who owed Victoria favors. People who trusted her. People who feared disappointing her. Sloane slowly looked up. Who are you? Victoria answered quietly. Someone who learned that good intentions do not stop bad people. Sloane looked back at the folder. And what do you do? A pause. I solve problems. The answer was too polished. Too practiced. Sloane noticed. What kind of problems? Victoria held her gaze. The kind that cannot be taken to the police. The room became silent. Because there it was. The truth hidden beneath the beautiful explanation. Victoria had not become powerful by accident. She had become powerful because she lived in places where rules did not always protect people. That evening, Sloane sat alone. The folder remained open. She hated that part of her was impressed. She hated that part of her understood. And she hated most of all that part of her felt safer. Because that was the dangerous thing about Victoria. She did not feel like a threat. She felt like home. And sometimes home was where people left the sharpest weapons. Across the city, Victoria stood in front of a man sitting in a dark room. He looked uncomfortable. Good. Who sent you? The man said nothing. Victoria placed a photograph on the table. Sloane. The man looked at it. You care about her. Victoria's expression changed. A warning. The man swallowed. I knew there was a weakness. No. Victoria's voice was quiet. She is not my weakness. A pause. She is the reason I have survived. The man looked away. You cannot protect her forever. Victoria stepped closer. I don't need forever. Her voice dropped. I only need enough time. The next morning, Sloane found a message waiting on her phone. Not from an unknown number. From Victoria. I need you to trust me today. Sloane stared at the words. Then another message appeared. Even if you hate me for what I do next. Sloane's heart tightened. Because suddenly she understood. The woman who had spent 20 years becoming dangerous was preparing to prove exactly how dangerous she had become. Chapter 10. The line between saving and destroying. Sloane Bennett had always believed the truth was something you uncovered. A fossil buried beneath layers of earth. A forgotten civilization hidden beneath sand. A story lost because nobody had looked closely enough. The truth was never the problem. It was what people did after they found it. That was where everything changed. Because some truths healed. Some truths destroyed. And some truths demanded a price. The message from Victoria remained on Sloane's phone. I need you to trust me today. She had read it 10 times. Not because she did not understand the words. Because she understood them too well. Trust was not simple. Not anymore. 20 years ago, trust was easy. It was sitting beside Victoria during lunch. Sharing secrets under the old oak tree. Laughing about a future neither of them could imagine. Back then, trust was innocent. Now trust had consequences. Now trust came with questions. Who was Victoria protecting her from? And who was Victoria protecting her from becoming? Sloane arrived at the location Victoria sent her. She expected secrecy. She expected something hidden. She did not expect a building in the middle of the city that looked completely ordinary. That was the first thing that unsettled her. Danger, in her experience, always announced itself. This did not. The receptionist greeted Victoria by name. Not with surprise. Not with fear. With respect. That told Sloane more than any explanation could. People knew Victoria. People listened when she spoke. They entered a private elevator. No buttons. No visible security. Just a scanner. Victoria placed her hand against it. The doors opened. Sloane looked at her. You have got to be kidding me. A small smile appeared. What? You realize how suspicious this is? Yes. And you are fine with that? I have been suspicious for most of my life. Sloane shook her head. There is the dramatic Russian answer. Victoria looked at her. You missed me. The words were quiet. Too honest. Sloane looked away. That is not the same as forgiving you. I know. The answer was immediate. No argument. No defense. That made it harder. The room beyond the elevator was nothing like Sloane expected. No weapons. No intimidation. No signs of criminal activity. Just information. Screens. Files. Maps. Reports. A wall filled with names. Sloane slowly walked forward. This is what you do? Victoria stood beside her. This is what I became. The words carried weight. Sloane looked at the wall. These people, some are dangerous. And some are victims. Sloane turned. You help people. Victoria looked away. Sometimes. That sounds like a complicated answer. It is. Why? A pause. Because sometimes saving someone means stopping the person hurting them. Sloane studied her. And what does stopping mean? Victoria did not answer. She did not need to. The silence answered for her. Sloane moved closer to the files. Her eyes caught names. Connections. Patterns. Then she saw it. A photograph. The same symbol. The same leaf. Her stomach tightened. Where did you get this? Victoria became still. Victoria. That file should not be here. Sloane looked at her. What does that mean? It means someone wanted it found. The words sent a chill through her. By who? Victoria walked closer. The person continuing the work. Sloane's eyes narrowed. You still think it is someone else? I know it is. The original killer? Possibly. Sloane looked at the evidence. Or someone connected to him. Victoria nodded. Family. Followers. Someone who believes they are continuing something. Sloane felt anger rise. How many people have you been investigating? Victoria did not answer. That was enough. How long? Since before I returned. The words hit. You were already investigating before you came to me. Yes. Why? Victoria looked at her. Because I knew they would come eventually. Sloane stepped back. You knew. I suspected. You keep using that word. Because it is true. No. Sloane shook her head. Because it makes you feel better. The words landed. Victoria looked at her. And for the first time, Sloane saw something beneath the control. Fear. Not for herself. For Sloane. You need to leave. Sloane stared. What? Go home. No. Sloane. No. Her voice strengthened. You do not get to bring me here, show me this world, and then decide when I leave. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. There she was. Hopper. The girl who never backed down. The girl who questioned everything. The girl who made Victoria believe there was still kindness in the world. You're exactly the same. And you're not. The words hurt. Both of them knew it. That evening, the first real attack came. Not physical. Not yet. A news alert appeared on every device. Breaking news, questions raised about famous paleontologists' early discoveries. Sloane stared. The article loaded. Her heart sank. Someone had released old information. Not everything. Just enough. The Mojave Desert. The anonymous tip. The graves. The questions from 10 years ago. The same accusations that could destroy everything. Her phone rang. Victoria. Sloane answered. Did you know this was coming? Silence. That was all she needed. Victoria. I was trying to stop it. The words were quiet. Sloane closed her eyes. You were handling it. Yes. The anger returned. Without telling me. I wanted to protect you. Sloane laughed bitterly. Do you hear yourself? Sloane. No. Her voice broke slightly. You keep saying protect like it makes everything acceptable. The silence between them stretched. Then Victoria said the words that changed everything. I would do anything to keep you safe. Sloane froze. Because she believed her. That was the terrifying part. She believed every word. And somewhere deep inside, she knew Victoria meant them. Hours later, Sloane sat alone in her office. The article remained open. The evidence remained on her desk. The past had returned. But this time she was not the young woman standing in the desert. She was not waiting for someone to save her. She was ready to fight. Her phone buzzed. A message. From Victoria. I fixed it. Sloane stared. 3 words. 3 words that made her blood run cold. Because she knew Victoria. And she knew what those words meant. Not, I solved the problem. Not, I found the truth. Not, I protected you. Fixed. The word carried something darker. Something final. Sloane immediately called. No answer. Again. No answer. A third time. Nothing. Then the message arrived. Not from Victoria. From an unknown number. You should ask your protector what she had to do. Sloane stared at the screen. And for the first time since Victoria returned, she was afraid of the answer. Chapter 11. The things we cannot undo. Sloane knew something was wrong before she opened the door. She did not know how. There was no evidence. No logical explanation. No scientific conclusion she could write down and defend. Just instinct. The same instinct that had guided her through excavation sites. The same instinct that told her when something buried beneath the earth was not what it appeared to be. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. She held her phone tightly in her hand. No messages. No calls. Nothing from Victoria. That frightened her more than anything, because Victoria always answered. Even when she was angry. Even when she was hiding something. Even when she was protecting her. Especially then. The door opened before she knocked. Victoria stood inside. And Sloane immediately knew. Something had changed. Not in the room. In her. For the first time since she returned, Victoria looked tired. Not physically. Something deeper. Like a person carrying something too heavy for too long. Sloane stepped inside. Tell me. Victoria looked at her. Sloane. Do not. Her voice cracked. Do not say my name like that. Like she was trying to soften what was coming. Like she was preparing her. Sloane looked around. Everything was perfectly clean. Too perfectly clean. There were no signs of what had happened. But Sloane had spent her life studying evidence. And sometimes the absence of evidence was evidence itself. What did you do? Victoria did not answer. That was the answer. Sloane swallowed. What did you do? This time louder. I handled it. The words hit harder than she expected. Because they were the same words. The same calm explanation. The same controlled voice. The same woman who believed she could carry the weight of the world without breaking. Sloane stepped closer. Handled what? Victoria looked away. The threat. The room became cold. What threat? The silence stretched. Then Victoria finally looked at her. The person behind everything. Sloane's stomach dropped. No. Victoria moved closer. Sloane. No. The denial came before the answer. Because somewhere inside, she already knew. I didn't ask you to do this. Victoria's expression softened. I know. No, you don't. Sloane's voice rose. You don't get to say that. I know what you were facing. No. Her eyes filled. You knew what I was facing. A difference. A painful one. And you decided for me. Victoria reached for her. Sloane stepped back. The movement hurt both of them. It was all done for you. Victoria smiled. Not because she was happy. Because she genuinely believed those words would bring comfort. Sloane stared at her. The woman she had loved. The girl she had lost. The person who came back and promised the past would never hurt her again. And now she was standing there. Having removed the danger. Having crossed a line Sloane never wanted crossed. I didn't ask you to kill anyone. The words came out broken. Half scream. Half sob. Victoria's face changed. Pain. Not guilt. That almost made it worse. I love you. The words fell into the space between them. Quiet. Honest. Terrifying. Because Sloane believed her. That was the cruelest part. She believed her. But love was not supposed to look like this. Lying does not look good on you, sweetheart. The words were quiet. But the accusation beneath them was sharp. Victoria flinched. Only slightly. But Sloane saw it. Do you think saying you love me makes this okay? No. The answer came immediately. No. Victoria stepped closer. I know it doesn't. Then why? The question broke them both. Why did you choose this? Why did you think this was love? Why did you believe I needed you to become someone I would fear? Victoria's voice lowered. Because I watched the world hurt you once. A tear slipped down her cheek. I wasn't there. Sloane froze. The first tear. The first crack. I promised myself that would never happen again. Sloane shook her head. Victoria. I was 17 when I lost you. You left me. I left because I loved you. The words stopped her. I left because my family was dangerous. Because my life was dangerous. Because I knew if I stayed, eventually someone would use you to get to me. Victoria took a breath. I spent 20 years becoming someone nobody could touch. Her eyes met Sloane's. Nobody. The room was silent. And when they came for you, she swallowed. I did what I promised myself I would do. Sloane closed her eyes. Because that was the tragedy. Victoria had kept her promise. She had simply never considered what keeping it would cost. I needed you. The words escaped before Sloane could stop them. Victoria looked at her. Not a protector. A pause. Not a weapon. Another pause. Not someone who decides who gets to live. Victoria looked down. I know. No. Sloane wiped her tears. You don't. Her voice softened. You spent 20 years learning how to survive. She stepped closer. But I spent 20 years learning how to live. That hurt. Because both of them were right. Outside, the city continued. Cars moved. People laughed. Lights flashed. The world carried on. Unaware that two people were standing in the middle of the ruins of a promise made decades ago. Victoria looked at Sloane. I would do it again. The honesty broke her. Sloane stared. That is the part that scares me. A tear fell. Not that you did it. She shook her head. That you would do it again and still believe it was love. Victoria had no answer. Because for the first time in 20 years, she wondered if protecting Sloane had been about Sloane. Or if it had also been about protecting the frightened girl inside herself who could not save her the first time. Chapter 12. The woman beneath the armor. Victoria had expected anger. She had expected disgust. She had expected Sloane to look at her the way other people looked at her. With fear. What she had not expected was silence. Sloane did not scream. She did not leave. She did not tell her she was a monster. She simply sat across from her, looking at her like she was trying to understand something impossible. And somehow, that was worse. Because Victoria could survive hatred. She had survived worse. But Sloane's sadness? That was something she had never learned how to fight. The room remained quiet for a long time. Eventually, Sloane spoke. When did you stop believing there was another way? Victoria looked at her. I don't know. The answer surprised her. Not because it was complicated. Because it was honest. I thought there would always be another way. Victoria looked down at her hands. At first. Sloane waited. Then I learned something. What? Sometimes good people lose because they refuse to become what bad people fear. Sloane's expression softened. And you decided to become that person. Victoria swallowed. Yes. The honesty hurt. Sloane stood and walked towards the window. The city stretched below them. Millions of lives. Millions of choices. Every person carrying something nobody else could see. Do you know what the worst part is? Victoria looked at her. I believe you. A small crease appeared between Victoria's brows. What? I believe that everything you did was because you loved me. The words broke something. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a small fracture in the armor Victoria had spent years building. But love does not make everything right. Victoria looked away. I know. No. Sloane turned back. I think you are starting to know. The words were gentle. Not cruel. And somehow that hurt more. For years, people had feared Victoria Volkov. They feared her reputation. Her influence. The things she could do. But nobody had ever sat across from her and asked, who hurt you? Not, what can you do? Not, how dangerous are you? Just, who hurt you? Victoria looked away. I was raised to believe love was something people used against you. Sloane's expression changed. Your family. A small nod. My father believed affection created weakness. And you? Victoria smiled sadly. I believed him. A pause. Until you. The words were barely above a whisper. Sloane felt the years between them disappear for a moment. Not 20 years. Not secrets. Not blood. Just two girls. One who loved dinosaurs and spent hours covered in dirt. One who came from a world where softness was dangerous. Do you remember the first time we met? Victoria looked at her. A small smile appeared. You were sitting behind the science building. Sloane smiled despite herself. I was digging. You were always digging. I was looking for fossils. You found a rock. It looked like a fossil. It looked like a potato. Sloane laughed. A real laugh. The first one in days. You were so mean. I was honest. You called my discovery a potato. It was a very convincing potato. The laughter faded, but the warmth remained. And for a moment, they were 17 again. Sloane moved closer. Not all the way. Not yet. But closer. You know what I remember? Victoria looked at her. You sitting next to me when nobody else would. A flicker of pain crossed Victoria's face. I was the weird girl. No. Sloane shook her head. You were the only person who saw me. That stopped her. Everyone thought I was strange. You were strange. Sloane smiled. Thank you. You are welcome. A small smile. But you were also brilliant. Victoria's eyes softened. And you were kind. The word seemed foreign. Like nobody had said it to her in years. Slowly, carefully, Sloane reached out. Not a dramatic gesture. Not forgiveness. Just a hand. An invitation. Victoria looked at it. Like she did not know what to do. You can still choose. The words were quiet. Victoria looked up. What? Every day. Sloane held her gaze. You can choose what kind of person you are. The silence stretched. Then Victoria placed her hand in hers. The contact was small, but it carried 20 years. Loss. Hope. Regret. Love. Victoria closed her fingers around Sloane's. I don't know if I can undo what I became. Sloane squeezed her hand. Neither do I. The honesty surprised her. But I know you are not only that person. A tear slipped down Victoria's cheek. She immediately looked away. Sloane noticed. Of course she noticed. Hey. Victoria looked back. Don't hide from me. The words were the same ones Sloane would have said 20 years ago. And somehow, they reached the same place. That night, neither woman slept. But for the first time in 20 years, they were not alone. Sloane sat beside Victoria on the sofa, their shoulders touching. No promises. No declarations. No pretending everything was fixed. Just presence. Sometimes healing did not arrive like a storm. Sometimes it arrived quietly. A hand held in the dark. A person staying when leaving would be easier. Outside, somewhere in the city, someone watched. Someone who believed the game was not over. A message appeared on Victoria's phone. One sentence. You cannot protect her from what she is about to discover. Victoria looked at the screen. Then at Sloane. For the first time in 20 years. Fear was not about losing Sloane. It was about Sloane discovering the truth. Chapter 13. The Air of the Buried Truth. The first thing Sloane noticed was that Victoria stopped sleeping. Not completely. Victoria was too disciplined for that. But Sloane noticed the small things. The untouched coffee. The way she checked every entrance before entering a room. The way her eyes moved towards windows whenever a car slowed outside. 20 years ago, Sloane would have mistaken it for confidence. Now she understood. It was vigilance. The kind that came from surviving too much. You know you are allowed to breathe, right? Victoria looked at her. A faint smile appeared. That sounds like something you would say. Because it is something you need to hear. I am fine. Sloane gave her a look. Victoria sighed. Still impossible. Still correct. For a moment, the tension lifted. Then Victoria's phone vibrated. The smile disappeared. Sloane saw it. Immediately. What? Victoria looked at the screen. Nothing. Just one message. No number. No sender. Only words. The girl who digs and the girl who disappears. Together again. Sloane felt cold. Not because of the message. Because of the familiarity. Someone knew them. Not Dr. Sloane Bennett. Not Victoria Volkov. Them. The girls they used to be. Who has access to this? Sloane looked at the phone. Victoria locked the screen. Many people. That is not an answer. It is the truth. Sloane crossed her arms. Try again. Victoria looked at her. There was no irritation. Only exhaustion. There are people from my past who know about me. And now they know about me. Yes. Why? Victoria looked away. Because you were always the one thing they could use against me. The words were quiet. Sloane felt them. Not because they were romantic. Because they were frightening. They went back to the evidence. Not as protector and protected. Not this time. Together. Sloane spread everything across the table. The leaf symbol. The Mojave files. The photographs. The messages. What do we know? Victoria looked at the evidence. The original killer operated for over 12 years. Yes. He disappeared after the Mojave discovery. Yes. Nobody found him. No. Sloane tapped the photograph. But someone knows. Victoria nodded. Someone continued. Why? The answer came after a pause. Because some people do not see monsters as criminals. Sloane looked up. They see them as legends. The breakthrough came 3 hours later. Not from police files. Not from intelligence reports. From a newspaper archive. A photograph. A man standing beside a group of investigators during the Mojave investigation. Sloane enlarged the image. There. Victoria looked. Her expression changed. You know him? Yes. Sloane stared. I knew him. The article headline appeared. Local forensic consultant assists in Mojave investigation. The name underneath made Victoria go completely still. Alexander Volkov. Sloane looked at her. Your father. Victoria did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. My father was not the killer. Sloane looked at her. I didn't say he was. But you thought it. Sloane did not deny it. Victoria looked at the photograph. He helped the investigation. Why? Because he wanted access. A chill moved through the room. Access to what? Victoria's jaw tightened. The evidence. The bodies? No. Her voice dropped. The pattern. Sloane studied her. Your father knew about the killer. Yes. How? Victoria looked away. Because my father was fascinated by him. The silence was heavy. He believed he understood him. Sloane whispered. That's impossible. No. Victoria's eyes met hers. That is exactly what made him dangerous. For years, Victoria had carried pieces of this story alone. She had never told anyone. Not because she was protecting herself. Because she was protecting Sloane. My father believed the killer was misunderstood. Sloane felt disgust. Misunderstood. He believed there was a reason. There is always a reason. Victoria looked at her. But there is never an excuse. Sloane held her gaze. For a moment, she saw something. Regret. Pain. A memory Victoria had buried. What happened to your father? Victoria's expression hardened. He died. When? 20 years ago. Sloane froze. The timing. Victoria saw it. Yes. The room became silent. The year I left. Sloane slowly sat down. The pieces were moving. Not fitting. Not yet. But moving. The person sending these messages, Victoria nodded, is connected to him. Family? Possibly. Who? Victoria looked at the message again. At the words. The girl who digs. The girl who disappears. A person who knew their past. A person who had been waiting. I don't know. And that was the first time Sloane heard something she had never heard from Victoria before. Uncertainty. That night, a man sat alone in a room filled with photographs. Old photographs. New photographs. Sloane Bennett. Victoria Volkov. The Mojave Desert. The leaf symbol. He placed 2 photographs beside each other. A teenage girl covered in dirt, smiling. A young woman standing beside her. He smiled. Not happily. Proudly. They finally found each other. A voice came from behind him. Are you going to tell them? The man looked at the photographs. No. Why? His fingers traced the edge of the old picture. Because they need to understand first. Understand what? The man looked towards the window. That some stories are not discovered. A pause. They are inherited. Chapter 14. The Girl Who Left. The first thing Sloane noticed was that Victoria did not deny anything. Not the photograph. Not her father's connection. Not the past. After everything they had uncovered, Sloane expected another wall. Another carefully constructed answer. Another piece of information kept just out of reach. Instead, Victoria sat across from her and looked tired. Not defeated. Just tired. Like a woman who had carried a secret for too many years and finally realized she was too exhausted to carry it alone. My father was a complicated man. Sloane looked at her. That is usually what people say before telling you something terrible. A faint smile touched Victoria's lips. You have not changed. Neither have you. The smile disappeared. No. The honesty of the answer silenced her. Victoria looked towards the window. When I was 17, I believed my family was powerful. A pause. Then I learned they were only afraid. Sloane listened. My father was brilliant. Like you. Victoria shook her head. No. She looked down. He was brilliant in the way a person can be brilliant and still destroy everything around them. Sloane understood. History was filled with people like that. Genius without humanity was just another kind of weapon. He worked with investigators during the Mojave case. Because he wanted to help? Victoria's expression hardened. At first, everyone thought that. And later, he became obsessed. Sloane leaned forward. With the killer? With understanding him. Victoria's fingers tightened. My father believed there was a pattern. A reason. A psychological structure nobody else could see. And the victims? Victoria looked away. To him, they became evidence. The disgust in Sloane's chest was immediate. Your father was studying a monster. Yes. A pause. Eventually, I realized he was becoming one. The room was quiet. Then Sloane asked the question she had been avoiding. What happened the night you left? Victoria closed her eyes. For 20 years, she had avoided this memory. Not because she forgot. Because she remembered everything. I found out my father knew more than he admitted. Sloane waited. He had files. About the killer? Yes. What kind of files? Victoria looked at her. Files that proved the killer was not working alone. The words settled between them. Sloane felt the weight. Someone helped him. Yes. Your father. No. The answer was immediate. Too immediate. Sloane noticed. But Victoria swallowed. My father knew who. The silence that followed was different. Not empty. Full. Full of everything neither of them wanted to say. Who? I never found out. Sloane frowned. But you left because of it. I left because someone tried to kill me. The words were calm. Too calm. Sloane froze. What? Victoria looked at her. The night I discovered the files, someone broke into our house. Sloane's expression changed. Your family. My father was not home. A pause. My mother told me to run. Sloane felt her chest tighten. Victoria. I was 17. Her voice became quieter. I was terrified. Sloane moved closer. You should have told me. The words were not angry. They were broken. Victoria looked at her. I wanted to. Then why didn't you? Because I knew what would happen. What? You would have tried to help. Sloane almost laughed. Of course I would have. Exactly. Victoria smiled sadly. That was the problem. She looked at her. You would have stood beside me. Yes. And they would have used you. The truth of that hurt. Because Sloane knew Victoria was right. I left because I loved you. The words were almost a whisper. I spent years hating myself for it. Sloane looked at her. Why? Because leaving you felt like abandoning you. A tear slipped down Victoria's face. But staying would have put you in danger. Sloane reached out. This time Victoria did not hesitate. Their fingers touched. I thought I was saving you. Sloane squeezed her hand. You were 17. I know. You were a child. Victoria looked away. I stopped being a child that night. No. Sloane's voice was firm. You survived that night. A pause. But you never let yourself come home. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Victoria whispered, I became someone who could never be helpless again. Sloane looked at her. And did it work? The question surprised her. Victoria looked confused. What? Did becoming dangerous make you happy? Silence. That was the answer. No. The word was barely audible. Sloane nodded. Because you didn't become who you wanted to be. She held her gaze. You became who you needed to be. That evening, they found the connection. Not through the messages. Not through the photographs. Through the old files. A name. A person connected to Alexander Volkov. Someone who had disappeared after his death. Someone who inherited his research. Someone who had access to the same evidence. The same symbols. The same obsession. Sloane stared at the screen. Who is he? Victoria looked at the name. And for the first time in years, she looked afraid. His son. The next message arrived before either of them could speak. No words this time. Only an image. A photograph taken minutes earlier. Sloane and Victoria sitting together. Holding hands. On the back. Now I know what he died trying to understand. A second message appeared. Love makes people predictable. Sloane stared at the screen. Then at Victoria. And Victoria understood. The person hunting them had finally stopped watching from the shadows. He was ready to be found. Chapter 15. The choice we make. The first thing Sloane noticed was how quiet the room became. Not peaceful. Waiting. The kind of silence that existed before something changed forever. The message remained on the screen. Love makes people predictable. Sloane stared at the words. Then she looked at Victoria. 20 years ago, she would have seen the girl who disappeared. The girl who left without saying goodbye. The girl who broke her heart. But that was not who stood in front of her now. This was the woman who crossed oceans. The woman who spent years fighting battles nobody knew existed. The woman who had made mistakes because she was terrified of losing the only person who ever made her feel safe. You were thinking about doing something reckless. Victoria looked at her. A small smile appeared. You know me well. I know you too well. Sloane stepped closer. And that is exactly why I know you are already planning to handle this alone. The smile disappeared. Sloane. No. Her voice was firm. You don't get to disappear again. The words stopped her. Because that was the truth. The greatest fear had never been the killer. It had been losing Victoria a second time. They found him where everything started. Not the desert. Not the graves. The archive. The place where history waited patiently for someone to uncover it. The man standing among the old files looked nothing like the monster Sloane imagined. That was the frightening part. He looked ordinary. Calm. Educated. Almost kind. Dr. Bennett. Sloane looked at him. Alexander Volkov's son. The man smiled slightly. So, you finally understand. Victoria stepped forward. You used father's work. His expression changed. No. A pause. I continued it. The words made Sloane's stomach turn. You think this is some kind of legacy? He looked at her. Everything has a pattern. People are not patterns. Everyone is. Sloane shook her head. No. She looked around at the files. That is what people say when they stop seeing humanity. The man looked at Victoria. You became exactly what father predicted. Victoria's expression hardened. And what is that? Someone who believes the ends justify the means. The words hit because they were true enough to hurt. Sloane saw it. The hesitation. The old wound. But she also saw something else. Victoria looked at her. Not the man. Her. And Sloane understood. This was the moment. The choice. Not between good and evil. Between the person Victoria had become and the person she still had the ability to be. You are wrong. The man's eyes moved to Sloane. Excuse me. You think you understand people because you study what breaks them. Sloane stepped forward. But you never studied what saves them. A small smile. Love. No. Sloane looked at Victoria. Choice. Silence. You think everyone is controlled by their past. She shook her head. But people are more than what happened to them. Her voice softened. Victoria is proof. For the first time, the man's confidence cracked. Because he understood something. He had studied pain. He had studied obsession. He had studied fear. But he had never understood healing. The confrontation ended quietly. No dramatic revenge. No final act of violence. Because Victoria finally understood something. Ending the cycle did not mean winning. It meant refusing to continue it. The evidence was handed over. The truth surfaced. The Volkov files became part of the investigation. The Mojave victims finally received the justice they had waited years for. And Victoria? For the first time in her life, she stopped running. Months later, Sloane stood outside her office. The city was the same. The lights, the noise, the endless movement. But everything felt different. Because this time, when she looked beside her, Victoria was there. Not watching from a distance. Not protecting from the shadows. Standing beside her. You know, Sloane said, for someone who disappeared for 20 years, you are surprisingly difficult to get rid of. Victoria smiled. You tried. No. Sloane looked at her. I waited. The smile faded. Just slightly. Because those words meant everything. They walked slowly. No danger. No secrets. No ghosts following behind them. Just two women trying to build something from the pieces they had carried for so long. Do you think we can do this? Victoria asked. Sloane knew exactly what she meant. Not survive. Not escape. Live. She reached for her hand. Yes. A pause. But not because the past disappeared. Victoria looked at her. Because we stopped letting it decide our future. Their fingers intertwined. A simple gesture. But after 20 years, it felt like coming home. That night, Sloane found herself looking at an old photograph. Two teenage girls. One covered in dirt. One pretending she was not smiling. She had spent years believing that photograph represented something lost. Now she understood. It represented something that survived. Some things were not buried because they were dead. Some things were buried because they needed time. And some stories waited 20 years for the right people to uncover them. Chapter 16. The Things That Stay. Sloane Bennett had spent most of her life uncovering things that had been buried. Ancient bones. Lost civilizations. Forgotten stories. She had always believed the most important discoveries were the ones hidden beneath the surface. She had been wrong. The greatest discovery of her life was standing beside her in the kitchen, arguing with her coffee machine. You know, Victoria said, staring at the machine like it had personally offended her, I have negotiated with people who were considerably more cooperative than this. Sloane leaned against the counter. It's a coffee machine. It is refusing to work. It is waiting for you to press the correct button. Victoria looked at her. You're enjoying this. Immensely. A small smile appeared. There it was. The smile Sloane remembered. Not the controlled expression of the woman who walked into her office. Not the careful mask. The girl. The girl who laughed behind the science building. The girl who made Sloane feel like being different was not something to hide. They were interrupted by a knock. Sloane did not freeze. She did not reach for a phone. She did not prepare for danger. And that alone felt like a miracle. She opened the door. DeAndre and DeMarcus stood outside carrying enough food to feed an army. Sloane stared. What is this? Breakfast. You brought enough food for 10 people. DeMarcus shrugged. We have been trying to feed you properly since you were 12. I was 12. Exactly. Sloane rolled her eyes. But she smiled. And her brothers noticed. They always noticed. Victoria stood behind Sloane. For a moment, everyone was quiet. 20 years. A lot could happen in 20 years. People changed. Lives changed. Families changed. But some things remained. DeAndre was the first to step forward. Not as an officer. Not as someone protecting a crime scene. Not as someone trying to fix the world around his sister. Just as her brother. Victoria. Her expression softened. DeAndre. DeMarcus smiled. You remember us? Victoria looked at them. I remember everything about that year. Something shifted. Because they understood. She remembered. The little sister's friend. The girl who disappeared. The person who had mattered. Breakfast became chaos within 15 minutes. Exactly as Sloane remembered. Her brothers argued. Victoria observed. Sloane tried to maintain order. Nobody listened. This is impossible, Victoria said. Sloane looked at her. You missed this. The answer was quiet. Yes. Just one word. But it carried 20 years. Later, when the plates were empty and the conversation became softer, DeMarcus leaned back. So, Sloane narrowed her eyes. She knew that tone. No. I haven't even said anything. You were about to. DeAndre smiled. She still knows you. Unfortunately. DeMarcus looked at Victoria. You know we have been trying to figure something out for years. Sloane looked suspicious. What? The nickname. Victoria smiled. Hopper. Sloane immediately covered her face. Oh no. Her brothers laughed. Oh yes. Victoria looked delighted. You never told me the full story. I told you enough. You told me your brothers teased you. They do that professionally. Accurate, DeAndre said. Sloane pointed at him. Do not encourage this. Victoria looked between them. So? DeMarcus smiled. She was 6 years old. Sloane groaned. No. She spent an entire summer digging holes in the backyard. I was looking for fossils. You were making craters. They could have been fossils. They were rocks. That is not the point. DeAndre laughed. The funniest part was when the neighbors asked what she was doing. DeMarcus continued. She told them she was conducting an archaeological excavation. Victoria covered her mouth, laughing. No. Yes. And what did they call you? Sloane sighed. They said I was like a little rabbit. Victoria smiled. Because you were always digging. Exactly. DeAndre leaned forward. And then she found a documentary about Chinese archaeologists and became convinced that she was going to discover something nobody else could. Sloane looked offended. I was ambitious. You were 7. I had vision. The room erupted in laughter. And Sloane realized something. This was what she had missed. Not the protection. Not being treated like something fragile. This. The teasing. The love hidden beneath sarcasm. The family that could annoy her and still make her feel safe. That evening, after her brothers left, Sloane and Victoria sat outside. The city stretched before them. Not threatening. Just alive. I like them. Sloane smiled. They like you. They do. They always did. Victoria looked down. I thought I lost all of this. Sloane reached for her hand. You lost time. A pause. But not us. Victoria looked at their joined hands. I spent 20 years becoming someone strong enough to protect you. Sloane smiled softly. And now? Victoria looked at her. Now I am learning how to simply love you. The words were quiet. But they were everything. Sloane rested her head against Victoria's shoulder. No danger. No secrets. No running. Just 2 women who had finally stopped fighting the past long enough to live in the present. Do you regret leaving? The question was gentle. Victoria thought about it. I regret that I had to. A pause. But I don't regret loving you. Sloane closed her eyes. Good. Why? Because I spent 20 years believing I was the only one who remembered. Victoria turned towards her. You were never the only one. Somewhere in a drawer was an old photograph. Two girls. One covered in dirt. One pretending she was not smiling. A friendship that became something neither of them had words for. A story interrupted, but never ended. Because some things are not lost. They are simply waiting. Waiting for the right person to come back. Waiting for the right moment to be found. Waiting for someone brave enough to dig. Epilogue. The life we choose. Sloan Bennett used to believe the most important discoveries were the ones that changed history. The ones displayed behind glass. The ones written about in journals. The ones that made people remember your name. She had spent years searching for things that had been lost. Ancient bones. Forgotten worlds. Stories buried beneath layers of time. But now, years later, she knew the truth. The most important things were not always the things you uncovered. Sometimes they were the things that stayed. The first thing Sloan noticed every morning was warmth. Not sunlight. Not coffee. Victoria. There had been a time when Sloan woke up and the first thought in her mind was what could go wrong. A new discovery. A new problem. A new threat waiting beneath the surface. Now she woke up and felt an arm wrapped around her waist. A quiet reminder. Still here. She opened her eyes slowly. Victoria was asleep beside her. The woman who once disappeared across an ocean. The woman who spent years becoming someone the world feared. The woman who had finally learned she did not have to be feared to be loved. Sloan smiled. "You're staring, Malishka." The words came out sleepy. Sloan raised an eyebrow. "You're awake. Unfortunately. You are incredibly rude for someone who is still half asleep." Victoria opened one eye. "And yet you stayed." Sloan smiled. 20 years. A pause. "Apparently I am committed." Victoria pulled her closer. The movement was gentle. Nothing like the woman who once walked through rooms like she was prepared for battle. This was different. This was the woman nobody else saw. The woman who laughed at bad jokes. The woman who secretly liked sweet coffee. The woman who still kept old photographs tucked away because she was afraid of losing them. The woman who loved quietly because once upon a time, loving loudly had been dangerous. "Coffee?" Sloan asked. "No." Sloan looked surprised. "You are refusing coffee?" "I am choosing this." Victoria tightened her arms around her. 5 more minutes. Sloan smiled. "You realize this is exactly how lazy mornings become entire days." "Good. Good." "Yes." Victoria looked at her. "We spent enough years rushing." The kiss was slow and tender, not frantic, because nothing about them is frantic now. The fierce Russian enforcer and the stubborn paleontologist is not needed now, just two women in love, and yes, coffee can wait. Their lives were not perfect. Sloan still worked too much. Victoria still checked exits when they entered unfamiliar places. Some wounds did not disappear just because someone loved you. But they became lighter. They became something carried together. And that changed everything. DeAndre and DeMarcus still visited every Sunday. They still argued. They still teased Sloan. They still acted as though she was 12 years old. "I am a Nobel Prize winner." DeMarcus looked unimpressed. "You are still the child who dug holes in the backyard." "I was conducting research." "You found a rock. A very interesting rock." Victoria always laughed. And every time she did, Sloan felt a little piece of the past heal. Her brothers no longer stood between her and danger. They stood beside her in happiness. And somehow that meant more. One afternoon, Sloan found Victoria sitting in the garden. A small box rested beside her. "What is that?" Victoria looked up. "Something I kept." Sloan sat beside her. Inside was an old rock. Sloan stared. Then she laughed. "No." "Yes." "You kept the potato?" Victoria looked offended. "It was important. It was a rock. It was the first thing you discovered." Sloan touched it gently. "After all these years. After everything. A silly little stone had survived." "So, you kept this for 20 years?" Victoria smiled. Some things are worth keeping. Sloane looked at her. The meaning was not lost. That evening, they sat together watching the sunset. No promises about forever. No dramatic declarations. They had learned that forever was not something you said. It was something you built. One morning, one conversation, one choice at a time. Sloane leaned against her. Do you ever think about what would have happened if we met at a different time? Victoria looked at her. No. Why? Because every version of me that existed before led me here. Sloane smiled. And is that enough? Victoria turned towards her. You are, Malishka. The answer was simple. Certain. Sloane kissed her. Not desperately. Not like something they had almost lost. Like something they had finally found. A quiet kiss. A lazy kiss. The kind of kiss that belonged to two people who no longer had to fight for tomorrow. Sloane Bennett spent her life uncovering the past. But the greatest discovery she ever made was not hidden beneath the earth. It was lying beside her on quiet mornings. It was laughing in the kitchen. It was holding her hand without fear. It was a love that disappeared for 20 years and still found its way home. Some things are buried. Some things are lost. And some things were always waiting to be found. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.